confirmation from our very own Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, who's in the Far East at the moment, that Diana, Princess of Wales, has in fact been in that car accident.
There are places in this world that carry so much weight, so much memory, so much love and grief, that even the ground around them seems to hold its breath. The small island at Althorpe, that quiet patch of water-ringed earth in the heart of Northamptonshire, England, is one of those places. For 27 years, it stood undisturbed. The trees grew taller around it. The seasons turned. Millions of people across the planet lived and died and grew old. And still that island remained sealed in time, untouched, the resting place of a woman the world had never truly let go of. Princess Diana. The name alone carries entire universes of emotion. She was a mother, a princess, a humanitarian, a rebel in a gilded cage. She transformed what it meant to be a public figure, and when she died on August 31st, 1997, in a Paris tunnel, the grief that followed was unlike anything the modern world had ever seen. Flowers piled 10 feet high outside Kensington Palace. Entire nations wept openly. And then she was taken to Althorpe, her family's ancestral estate, and buried privately away from palace protocol on a small island surrounded by a lake, accessible only by boat. And there she rested for 27 years, until recently, when that tomb was opened, and what was found inside changed everything. The first question anyone asks is the most obvious one. Why now? After nearly 3 decades of stillness, what could possibly justify disturbing such a sacred resting place? The answer, at its surface, was practical. Burial structures are not immune to time, and a tomb situated on a small island, surrounded by water on all sides, exposed to the damp English climate year after year, faces particular challenges. Moisture seeps, foundations shift, stone that looks solid from a distance can be quietly deteriorating from within. Several years before the opening, Earl Charles Spencer, Diana's younger brother and the hereditary custodian of the Althorpe estate, commissioned a structural engineering survey. He wanted to know if the tomb was holding. He wanted certainty, not assumption. The survey results were not catastrophic, but they were not reassuring either. The report identified areas of concern serious enough to warrant a formal inspection and potential restoration. Water management around the burial chamber had become a technical issue. The long-term preservation of the site could not be guaranteed without intervention. Earl Spencer, who has guarded his sister's memory with fierce protectiveness since her death, would not allow her resting place to quietly deteriorate. If repairs were needed, they would be made. British law added a layer of complexity. Private burials on personal estates operate under a specific set of legal obligations, and after significant intervals of time, often measured in decades, these sites are subject to review and compliance assessments. The 27-year mark appears to have coincided with such a legal threshold, providing both a formal obligation and a practical window during which the work could be conducted with proper authorization. But to reduce the opening of Diana's tomb purely to engineering, and law would be to miss something essential. According to multiple sources familiar with the matter, her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, personally wanted to verify that their mother's resting place remained dignified and intact. They had grown up knowing that their mother was buried at Althorpe, away from the royal palaces, away from the media, in a place their uncle had chosen to give her peace. The idea that this peace might be physically compromised was not something either of them could leave uninvestigated. The operation itself was conducted with a level of secrecy that spoke to how seriously those involved understood the weight of the moment. The Althorpe estate was closed to visitors. Staff were largely kept uninformed. A select team of structural engineers, preservation specialists, and funeral professionals arrived before dawn, moving quietly through the estate grounds in the pale morning light. Earl Spencer was present throughout. He had spent 27 years protecting his sister's story, fighting legal battles over her image, writing books, managing the annual memorial, and he was not about to step away from this moment. Reports indicate that Prince William was on site at some point during the process, though the specifics of his presence remain carefully guarded. Prince Harry's attendance is less certain. Some accounts suggest he was connected remotely by video from his home in California, an arrangement that itself reflected the emotional and geographic distance that had grown between the brothers in recent years. The team worked methodically. Every step was documented. Engineers taking detailed notes, photographs recorded for historical archives. Nothing was rushed. The work was designed to cause a minimum possible disruption, respecting both the physical site and its profound spiritual significance. When the burial chamber was finally accessed, for the first time since Diana was laid to rest in September 1997, those present reportedly stood in silence. The engineers' notes could wait. For a moment, there was only the stillness of the chamber and the weight of what it meant to be standing there. The structural assessment brought some relief. The initial fears had somewhat overstated the damage. The chamber had fared better than expected, a testament to the care taken in its original construction. Those present allowed themselves a breath of cautious relief. And then someone noticed something that had not appeared on any inventory from 1997, hidden within the burial chamber, placed alongside Diana but never formally documented, never disclosed to the public, never acknowledged in any official record, were items that had been placed there either during the original burial or sometime shortly after. Their presence was unexpected. Their nature was extraordinary. The items included sealed letters, envelopes prepared in Diana's own hand, addressed to specific people she loved, designed to be opened only when this moment came. There were also what appeared to be personal documents, papers Diana had compiled during her lifetime recording her experiences, her observations, and the private truths of her years inside the royal family. Alongside these were personal objects, intimate belongings chosen for their emotional significance rather than their monetary value, items that connected directly to relationships and moments Diana had never made public. What transformed routine structural inspection into a moment of historical significance was the unmistakable realization that Diana had planned for this. She had anticipated that her tomb might one day be opened. She had prepared for it. She had placed inside that chamber a series of messages intended to reach forward through time, to the people she loved, and, perhaps, to the world itself. The letters were sealed, addressed, and apparently waiting patiently for 27 years. The letters are, by most accounts, among the most emotionally overwhelming elements of the discovery. Diana was a gifted communicator. She understood people, their fears, their needs, their capacity for both resilience and fragility, with a depth that was almost preternatural. Her public speeches moved millions. Her private conversations, by all accounts, moved individuals just as deeply. And now, from beyond death itself, she had found a way to reach forward through time. The letter, believed to be addressed to Prince William, who was only 15 years old when his mother died and who will one day be King of England, is said to explore the burden and the beauty of the role ahead of him. Diana had watched the monarchy up close for nearly 2 decades. She had seen its grandeur and its cruelty, its ritual and its loneliness. In this letter, she reportedly wrote with both tenderness and clarity about what it means to lead with genuine humanity rather than institutional performance. She urged William to remain connected to real people, to the kind of life she had tried to show him existed beyond palace walls. She spoke of love not as sentiment, but as a form of strength. For a future king navigating one of the most scrutinized positions on earth, the words of his mother, preserved for nearly 3 decades, carry a gravity that is almost impossible to overstate. The letter to Prince Harry is described as more emotionally raw. Diana understood her younger son's particular vulnerability, his sensitivity, his fierce spirit, the way the world could wound him more readily than others. The letter reportedly encouraged Harry to remain true to himself even when the institution around him demanded otherwise. She seemed to anticipate the pressures that would come, the tension between duty and authenticity, between what the royal family required and what Harry's own soul needed. She urged him toward sincerity and away from spectacle. Whether or not those words have fully reached him, and what they mean to him now, in the context of the very public rupture he has experienced with the royal family, is a question that hangs in the air with extraordinary weight. The letter to Earl Spencer focused, by many accounts, on family, on the Spencer legacy, on how Diana wished to be remembered by those who had known her not as a princess, but simply as a sister. She asked her brother to continue being what he had always been, the keeper of her story, the person who would ensure that the human Diana was not swallowed whole by the mythological one. It was a request born from deep trust and deep love. Other letters remained sealed. Their recipients have not been identified. Publicly, the possibility that Diana left messages for additional people, friends, confidants, individuals who shaped her life in ways the public never fully knew, adds another layer of mystery to an already extraordinary discovery. If the letters were personal, the documents found alongside them were something closer to historical. According to sources with knowledge of the discovery, the papers Diana left behind were not simply diary entries or emotional reflections. They were, at least in part, detailed records of conversations, records of agreements and broken promises, notes about specific incidents inside the royal household that had never been made public. Diana had always known that she was living inside a story that others were determined to control. The palace machine had a particular version of reality it wished to project, and she had spent years pushing against it, sometimes publicly, sometimes privately, always at personal cost. It appears she decided that whatever happened to her, she would not allow the full truth of her experience to simply vanish. She wrote things down. She preserved them. She placed them somewhere she believed they might one day be found. The documents reportedly contain perspectives on her marriage that challenge the sanitized version history has often defaulted to. They include observations about palace decision-making that she disagreed with, about behaviors she witnessed that troubled her, about the gap between the public image of the royal family and the private reality she knew intimately. There are also notes that touch on her safety. Diana's famous letter, the one in which she reportedly predicted that she might die in a staged car accident, has been publicly discussed for years. The documents found in the tomb may offer additional context for how seriously she took these fears and how carefully she documented the events and conversations that gave rise to them. Those who have seen the materials suggest they add dimension and specificity to concerns that were dismissed by some and treated as prophecy by others. The discovery did not remain secret for long. News of the tomb's opening and the materials found inside began to circulate, carefully, through private channels at first, and then with increasing urgency as it became clear that the find was genuinely significant. King Charles, Diana's former husband, now found himself in an extraordinarily delicate position. The materials in that tomb potentially spoke directly to him, to his relationship with Diana, to choices made during years that had already been exposed and examined more thoroughly than perhaps any royal marriage in modern history. Whatever the documents contained, the possibility that they might be made public created immediate concern within the palace. Camilla, now queen consort, reportedly received the news with considerable anxiety. Diana's feelings about Camilla were never private. The two women existed in a triangular dynamic with Charles that had defined the public understanding of the marriage's collapse. The possibility of renewed scrutiny, of additional revelations, of Diana's voice reaching forward once again to complicate a carefully managed narrative. This was not a comfortable prospect. Informal approaches were reportedly made by palace representatives to Earl Spencer, seeking either information or access. Spencer, by all accounts, declined. The materials were on Spencer family property, the product of Spencer family history, and Spencer has never been inclined to see control of his sister's legacy to the institution she had been so at odds with during her life. The brothers, William and Harry, reportedly responded to news in ways entirely consistent with the divergent paths their lives have taken. William, who has built his identity around a version of the monarchy that balances modernity with institutional continuity, is said to favor caution. He understands the importance of protecting his family in his future role, and he is wary of a public reckoning that could destabilize the crown at a fragile moment. Harry, who left the royal family in a rupture defined precisely by his insistence on public honesty, is said to lean toward transparency. He believes the world deserves to understand who his mother truly was and what she truly experienced. Between them, Earl Spencer holds the balance. As the primary custodian of Althorpe and of the materials found there, the ultimate decision rests largely with him. He has said nothing publicly. He moves carefully and deliberately, the way a man moves when he is holding something precious and irreplaceable, knowing that whatever he does next cannot be undone. There is a version of this story that is simply about engineering. A tomb was inspected, repairs were made, a historical curiosity was noted. But no one who has followed Diana's life and legacy, who has paid attention to the decades of questions her death left unanswered, who has watched the way her sons have grown up carrying the weight of her absence, No one who's been paying attention believes this is simply about engineering. Diana prepared for this moment. She placed those letters and documents somewhere she believed they would eventually be found. She trusted the future, however uncertain, however far away, to complete a conversation she could not finish in her lifetime. That is not the act of a woman who believed her story was fully told. It is the act of a woman who knew, with quiet certainty, that there was more the world needed to hear. The tomb at Althorpe was always more than a grave. It was always, in some sense, a form of continuation, a place where the memory of Diana was preserved not just symbolically but literally, in the silence of the island, in the care with which her brother maintained it, in the way her sons carried the awareness of it through their entire adult lives. Now it appears it was also something else entirely, a carefully curated act of foresight, a message sent forward through time, sealed in envelopes and folded into documents, waiting patiently for 27 years for the right hands to open them. The letters have not been made public. The documents remain sealed. The future of these materials, whether they will be archived, released to historians, kept private forever, or one day revealed to the world, is still being determined by the people closest to them. But the questions they raise, the dimensions they add to a story the world has been turning over for nearly 3 decades, are already reshaping how we understand the woman buried on that island. She was not simply a victim of circumstance, a beautiful casualty of institutional cruelty and public obsession. She was someone who thought deeply, planned carefully, and trusted that the truth, her truth, the full and unvarnished version of it, was worth preserving. 27 years after her death, Princess Diana has found a way to speak again, and the world is listening.